Hello and welcome to the ACMG competition. I wanted to introduce myself as Joshua along giving you guys the tutorials. So now we're about halfway through all the tutorials you need to create your first game. But we're going to move on to something that's actually a necessity in creating our game. And in a previous one I actually created a room, and I apologize that I didn't teach you how to do that, but we're going to use this tutorial to learn how to create a room. So the first thing, as we do with all of our new instances, we are going to right-click and hit Create Room. And this brings up this lovely dialog that just looks confusing at first. So we're going to explain a little bit. When you first open it up, we are introduced to a new interface, but it's kind of familiar, as we've seen with like the image manipulation and animation and objects and everything else. But let's start off with our grid options. Up top we have our confirm, undo, new, next, lock, unlock, and then we have our snapping. And the snapping, we're going to actually just keep it to 32 by 32 because we're not actually going to mess with anything larger or smaller, and we're not really going to change the position of our objects based on a smaller or larger grid. And what this is what our objects actually snap to when we place them on the grid. So, a lot of common ones are 16 by 16, 5 by 5 is alright. It gives you a little bit more precision when you're placing objects. 64 by 64 is another common one. And then you can even go as far as to like 128 by 128, 256 by 256. Kind of messed that up there. 256. Okay, alright. Let's try this again. 256. If you have a larger room and you're just doing cards or something. Like I said, though, we're just going to stick to 32 by 32. And then right next to it, you have what type of a grid. Is this going to be an isometric one, if you make an isometric game? Or is it just going to be the standard grid? Or you can simply just toggle it off if you get tired of looking at the grid. And then you have, what gets seen. You can zoom in, zoom out. Or if you get lost in it, you can just go back to the normal view. And this box here is your instance order. So if you're placing objects in this level, pardon me, and if you recall back to our other video about depth creation, then when you open this, you will become very, very familiar with what's going on. And this is the layer of what the objects are actually created in. You can choose to make things up or down so they display correctly. The first thing we're going to go over is the objects, and this is what we're faced with when we first open our new room. Our objects are the different objects that we've created in our previous tutorials, and what you can do here is you can left click and you can select what you want to add to it, or you can select down here where it says object to add with left mouse, and you can choose here as well, and it changes accordingly. Or you can click this little menu button, which just a lot of redundancy. It's easier just to click there and change it. And then if you look further down, you have more options such as delete underlying. So if I was to create an object and then create another object and create another object and it just keeps overlapping, it's going to delete whatever's underneath it. And sorry about that. That's the game engine's error showing. But if anything gets created, it can delete anything under it, so you don't have it like a ton of the same object in the same area. Most of the time I just leave it off because working with a grid, you should be clicking too much and nothing should really overlap. But if you look down here, we got the left mouse button options, using the Alt, Shift, Control, Space, and then the right ones to delete, and the middle mouse is, to scroll in and out, or you hold the scroll button and you can change your, where you're looking at your map. So if you're really close, you can change it. And then, of course, the copy and pasting of objects. So I'm going to show you what it's like to add an object. So once we have it selected, we click on our grid wherever we want it to, and it creates our object here. And with it selected, the options over here on the left-hand side are actually activated. And we have the scale X, the scale Y, the rotation, the alpha, and the color of this object. So the scale simply is how big it should go in each direction. So if I selected 2 by 2, it's going to expand it, 2 and 2. If we do 0.5 and 0.5, it makes it smaller by half. So I'm going to just make it 2 just so you can see it a little bit better. And I'm going to turn off my grid. And the rotation is what this object should start out facing as. So 90 is up, 180 is left, and 270 is down. Obviously, you can, do anything in between. If you, have them looking at a certain object for a cutscene. But by default, since this is going to be our player and he's going to be facing whatever way our mouse is facing or whatever our keys are pressed facing, I'm just going to keep him with the default 0. And the alpha is his transparency on this. So it starts at 255 and its minimum is 0. So it's either showing or it's not showing, as you can see. And it has to have a value, obviously. 180 is a good one for a semi-transparent object that you want to add into the level, like a ghost, maybe. But for the most part, you're just going to keep it at 255, which is the default. And color, this is a quick way to change what color masks this sprite. And so it can be whatever you want. Some colors mix better with others, some look ridiculous. And by default, it is white. And then you can flip the X, or you can flip the Y, which, well, the Y doesn't make much change on this object. But the X does, as you can see. And so that is adding an object, and that is super easy to mess with. Now, if you wanted to, I don't know, let's show the grid, and then we'll go in order. So, as you can see, when I drag an object, it snaps right to the grid. And let's say we don't want it to snap to the grid, instead we want it in the middle of the circles. Well, that's annoying when it snaps, so if we hold the Alt key on our keyboard, we can actually drag it without having it snap to the grid. But as soon as we let it go, and then we click on it and try to drag it, it's going to go right back to the grid. So once we let go, make sure you hold Alt every time you want to change it. Now let's say we have our object and we want to add multiples of it. Let's go ahead and hold Shift and Control. And then with our object selected on the left, we can create tons of our objects. So that's a ton of players. And if we want to select, we can select. But if we want to add, we hold Control and then press. And this is, getting another object. And this is where that delete underlying would actually come in handy, is if you're adding them, by holding the Control key. And then to delete, we hold the Shift key plus the right mouse will delete everything of that instance. Or we can just manually do it and hold down Control and then hold down the right click, and just anything we hover over with these two buttons pressed will delete. Now I've actually never done this delete all, but we can go ahead and try it. I'm not seeing how that's working. It says Shift plus right mouse button. I'm not seeing this. Interesting though that it says that. Alright, so if we had one selected, let's see. Okay, so if there was like a bunch of objects underneath that object, it would delete everything in the depth order. And instead of deleting literally all of the objects on the screen, it would delete everything underneath it. And that's what that means. And so that's why I've never used it, because I've never had anything that deep. Now, if you right-click on an object, you get a bunch of different code for this object. And code, I mean menu. So you can either edit the object, which will bring you to the object's, properties page. If you right-click and do creation code, this is going to bring a code window up that you can edit so that when this instance is created, something will happen with it. And I can actually, why not? No. Let's move this instance. go ahead and copy this. And in case you're wondering what that really does, I'll go ahead and comment it. And all it is move towards point, the x value, the y value, and how fast it should move. And so this is going to move this instance to 0, 0, which is this top left-hand corner. Whereas we want this large one to move towards, I don't know, let's do 5 by 5. And we want them to go really slow. So let's put 1 in there. So when these instances are created, this is what's going to happen. You see that? You see how fast that one moved? And you see how slow that one's moving? So that's per instance. So instead of moving the entire array of players, it only moves those ones. So if everything plays out as it should, there you go. Everything moves to those points, and they don't stop because they're just going to keep going. They have no stop code, whereas those other ones just move to those places. So you get the idea. Alright, and so now you have an idea of how to create a room. And I am going to stop here, and in the next tutorial you'll be able to see all the different options in creating a room. So I hope you guys get the basic idea of creating rooms and adding objects to those rooms, and I look forward to talking to you guys about creating all this awesome settings and stuff for the room in the next one. I'll catch you guys later. Thank you for watching.